Hello and welcome to the third Cod-Past, and with it comes an apology for a delay. I am really sorry that I wasn't able to keep up with the schedule that I set for myself 3 months ago. It's just been rather hectic here, and I've not had a free weekend to just sit down and make videos. This is part of the reason why the Patreon account is set to a per creation payment thing rather than a per month thing. On the off chance that I'm not able to do anything like I was recently, I don't want you guys to have to pay for nothing, essentially. So don't worry if you're going to support me on Patreon. Just, I am aware of my own limitations. And again, apologies for taking so long to get back with you guys. It has just been hectic. I've been doing a lot of video-related work, but unfortunately I've not had anything to show for it. I've been busy creating assets for the next Beastiary video, but also kinda got stuck in with various other video projects like the Hero project, which I'll get to shortly, and alas, I've got nothing to show for it just yet. However, I've also had just very, very busy month and nary a free weekend to sit down and focus on videos. But hopefully this month all of that will change and we can get right back on schedule, as this podcast will hopefully initiate. Anyway, this month there are quite a few comments, because I've got a whole month of them to get through, so without further ado, let's get started. First things first, we'll start with DragonZilla, one of the more frequent commenters on the channel, saying that they find me to be very similar to a man called Trey the Explainer. I'm not actually familiar with Trey the Explainer. I might be. You see, when my friend and I, bad grammar, when my friend and I originally started this YouTube channel, we sort of had a vague idea of what we wanted to do. I myself am rather adept at biology, and I enjoyed playing around with biological ideas, which is where the reification portion of the Beastiary videos come from. This is because when I study, and when I was studying biology, I would often try to play with the ideas in the textbooks and play with the ideas that I was learning by applying them to things that I saw in daily life. So if I was watching a fantasy video, I would think, oh, okay, how does the metabolism of this creature work, and how is that creature able to climb up a wall, etc., etc., and just generally flesh it out in my own mind. Of course, this made me a very annoying person to watch films with, because I would often be mumbling to myself about how something doesn't make sense. So yeah, it kind of bled over into this project. Going back to the Trey point though, after a while, we did look at all of YouTube to see who was doing similar videos, and of course we found some people, and indeed I may have seen Trey at some point, but I don't directly recall this individual, so I'm sorry that I don't know who you're talking about. I've not had an opportunity to look them up. However, I will take a look and see if there's maybe anything that I can take inspiration for future videos from Trey the Explainer. So thank you for that, DragonZilla. Incidentally, I should mention that the partner that I was working with when we started this channel did separate at about the 4th or 5th video, and although his name does appear in the credits, it's, he wasn't actually doing anything with me at that time. Not that we separated for any particularly untoward reason, it's just that we were doing different things and I kinda got stuck into doing these videos, so yeah. Moving on. Victoria Mustafa. That was strangely difficult to pronounce, mostly because the spelling is a bit odd, but thank you for the fun name to try and read. Victoria Mustafa commented on the previous Cod-Past that they would very much like to see the Hero video, and at this point I would like to talk a little bit about it, and if any of you listening to this have any ideas, please let me know. Okay, so what I had done originally was I had planned to give the outline of the hero's main plot, the story in which they first appear, or the most famous story, the story for which they are most famous. But after that, I was going to, go into some of the more detailed aspects of the story and what we can learn from it. Nani. However, I ran into some problems in that it was taking really long. Now, the time that it took to create one of these videos was often in excess of 30 minutes for the recording alone, and I didn't want to have very long videos. My goal was to try and find a sort of niche, fill a niche that my channel was experiencing. My goal was to try and fill a niche that I noticed in my channel, which was that people were often clicking away from the videos after about 5 minutes. So I wanted to try and produce more shorter form content, not only to sort of fill my time over here, the little free time that I have, that I'm not doing anything, but also to hit that 5-minute sweet spot. Unfortunately, the way that I went about this was not actually conducive to matching that 5-minute sweet spot. So I very quickly ran into a brick wall with that. I tried a couple of ways of going about this, even shortening down the story to a humorous length. Like, literally, I was very jokingly telling the story at one point, using a lot of tropes and not very many details to get the story across. As you can imagine, this was not the best way to go about it, and I really didn't like it. I had generated a lot of assets for the video series. I had created the opening scenes, which that was a lot of work, and also had done a lot of background work, etc. By background work, I mean literally working on the backgrounds and working on the presentation. But again, the meat of the videos was just not coming together the way that I wanted. So what I had done afterwards is that I looked at other video producers on YouTube to see how they went about it. And it appears that, nobody actually manages to get that 5-minute point for that type of content. I looked at people like, what was his name? Lindy Beige, who gets up in front of a camera, says what he needs to say, and gives his opinion, etc., etc. And that's kind of what I wanted, but it takes him often in excess of 20 minutes. A lot of his earlier videos he cut into 5-minute blocks, but those originally were going to be about 15-20 minutes. And his more recent videos, where he actually goes into the amount of detail that I like and what people actually find interesting, are quite long. Now, while I am sure that there are a lot of people here who would like to listen to my strange voice rambling on for the better part of an hour, it's not something that I can easily do myself. I'm still having to work and produce the Beastiary videos, so it may come to the point that I might have to re-evaluate how I go about doing a lot of these things. If anybody has any suggestions or anything that they would like to see in this matter, do let me know. I want to try and create this channel to be to be as interesting and entertaining as possible. I can only really do that if I know what people want. That said, however, I still want to continue with the Beastiary videos, despite the amount of time that they take to create, so I'll probably have to make a compromise at some point. Oh, let me click here through the stuff. So yeah, without anything else, that's pretty much what's happening with the hero videos. I'm still intending to do them, but I need to find a way to get them across in a way that I like, or at least that other people will like, and one that is conducive to the time constraints that I have. Moving on though, surprisingly enough, our only patron, or my only patron, thank you, Savannah has put a comment on one of the more unexpected videos. A couple of months ago, I produced a video about me performing rather poorly a tea ceremony. I say poorly because it was poorly cut and I wasn't actually following all the rules. I was still new to the tea ceremony at that point, so yeah. And I did promise to make a few more videos about Japan in general. However, I was going to focus on the less common stuff, so I did a lot of research and looked at what other people were doing on YouTube, and then very firmly decided not that. So I don't want to do daily life in Japan videos. I don't want to do, mostly because I'm not interested in that kind of thing, and daily life in any country is, well, as I've experienced, like daily life in any other country, just slightly different paint, as it were. So yeah, I wanted to try and do a bit more of the niche things, a bit more of the nuanced stuff. So I made a few more tea ceremony videos for Savannah. I have to do some editing on them though. I did one that was specifically related to the Harvest Moon 2 days ago. I hope I can get this video up shortly, but anyway, the Harvest Moon was on the... oh gosh, I forgot the date. It was on the 4th of October. And as I sit here now, I'm about to go to Tokyo for a... I'm about to go to Tokyo for a short holiday, so yay. I'll hopefully have this Cod-Past up when I get back from Tokyo. Anyway, so I had recorded the Harvest Moon stuff, and hopefully that's okay. The lighting, however, is rather bad. I'm going to see how I can fix it up, and maybe I can show a Harvest Moon tea ceremony. The Harvest Moon celebrations in Japan are quite interesting. They don't actually have tea ceremonies for the Harvest Moon. It's more like a small dinner and an offering to the moon. They offer pampas grass, which is a very beautiful type of grass in the moonlight, incidentally. I, however, wasn't particularly interested in that, and since I am studying the tea ceremony, I thought, may as well combine the two. As I say, the light wasn't all that great. Got to work on it, but I've got stuff coming for you, Savannah, so don't fret or worry or whatever it is that we might do in such circumstances. I will hopefully have the tea ceremonies edited better. I'm still working off of, it is a powerful laptop, but it's underpowered compared to a desktop PC, so editing 4K videos like the tea ceremony was is a little bit difficult, mainly because when I'm making a lot of cuts, the process tends to lag a little bit, and I can't accurately see at which frame I need to cut the videos, and it does cause a little bit of unprofessional looking cutting, and I want to avoid that as much as possible. So I might have to not work in 4K in the future. It's not something that I want to accept, but yeah, I'll have to do that. Next up is a rather interesting series of comments by Kerry Coyle. Now, these comments are incredibly long, and I should mention that I am not particularly well versed in this kind of mythology, if you would like to call it that. But Carrie Coyle spoke at length about mermaids and how they are related to Atlantis and the Anunnaki and a lot of, how should I say, Illuminatus-esque fables and stories. It is quite a read. I will try to link to these comments down in the description below, but as I say, very long, so do grab a cup of tea and give it a look. If you're interested in that kind of stuff, I imagine that any of Robert Anton Wilson's books would be right up your alley, or Umberto Eco. Those books are difficult, but again, do take a look at that. One thing to mention though is that I did have a correction for that, which was the mermaid is, the Lady of the Lake is not actually a mermaid. The Lady of the Lake is, in fact, just a sort of the best way I could describe it is a water nymph, or maybe some kind of spirit. But I do mention the Lady of the Lake as a mermaid, and I have my excuses in my reply to Kerry Coyls, so do take a look at that. But that is a correction that I do want to put out there, that everybody can take a look at it. A lot of people enjoyed the Centaur video, and I'll get to my own self-critique of the Centaur video very shortly, as soon as I'm done with the comments here. But I actually quite enjoyed it. Savannah once more mentions that she had no knowledge of the Centaur apart from what is presented in Harry Potter, and surprisingly enough, I found that a lot of people on the internet, kind of shared this problem, in that Harry Potter is probably the most popular presentation of the Centaur, despite being actually quite limited. You can actually find a more general description of them in the Percy Jackson book series. There. My tongue's tripping over itself. And I do recommend, if anybody wants a more accurate characterization of the Centaur, do read the Percy Jackson and the Olympians book series. They're a little bit... They're well written, but they are meant for a teenage audience, so do bear that in mind when you are reading. I do recall myself rather enjoying Artemis Fowl and whatnot when I was younger, but as I've grown up, I've started to notice the holes in that series, and the same is true for Percy Jackson. Percy Jackson is a lot more well constructed than Artemis Fowl, but again, this is teen fiction, so not to bash on it, but if any of my older viewers, and there are quite a few of you, have nothing, are not interested in that kind of stuff, you might want to avoid it and maybe watch the movies, though the Centaur characterization is very limited in the films. So yes. Damien Wielden is a person who asked me to talk about the Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them film. And that is one of the videos that I did make. However, I was thinking about it and thought I would do a stream. Yes, a stream. Ooh, exciting. I did muck around with streaming settings and whatnot a while ago. Some of you may have noticed the accidental publication of that stream, which didn't actually have anything on it. I was testing out features and whatnot. But I do want to discuss the Fantastic Beasts creatures a little bit more, especially because it's an easy topic to talk about. The main thing that I noticed with that story is that a lot of the magic just seems to be non-Euclidean geometry, so it does get a little bit boring to talk after a while. Talk about after a while. The Niffler creature that steals all of the monies, etc., has a non-Euclidean pouch in its belly, and the bag that the main character possesses is also non-Euclidean in nature. Just as a general thing, non-Euclidean means that the space that it occupies doesn't really match the space that it contains. So the volume doesn't match. Non-Euclidean geometry is quite fun and actually should be employed more in video games, but yeah. Again, it was the main kind of magic that they had in the most recent Fantastic Beasts film. Not most recent, the only Fantastic Beasts film. And that was a little bit, it is a bit limiting. Stolstika Gurung asks, are fairies real? And fairies are a creature that I want to do a video of. In fact, they are on the list of things to do. Someone has requested them. So, yeah. The short and simple answer to the fairies video is that in the mythological sense of fairies, in the way that they're presented in myth, no, they're not real. It's not possible to have a human that small. This is mostly because our bodies are designed to be a certain size, and after shrinking things down, if you want to go to like tiny little non-Shakespearean fairies, the human body just doesn't function. Oxygen molecules become far too large for our lungs to process, and we basically become blind because the apertures of our pupils are way too small at that level to adequately interact with light. So it's not something that we can easily justify. You can sort of see this kind of thing in Ant-Man, the Ant-Man movies. They kind of address this, in that Ant-Man, when he shrinks down, has to wear a suit. The suit is ostensibly to provide him with a way to breathe and give him a way to see. However, they kind of muck it up a little bit because basically he is able to shrink down to the size of an atom, smaller than an atom, and yet is still able to see atoms, despite the fact that he's now smaller than photons. So he's smaller than the things with which the material with which he would see. And also later on in the film, they somehow shrink down a tank so that a man can carry it on his pocket, despite the fact that it's now significantly more dense and would probably leave a hole, a very deep hole in the ground. and also they expand a very small toy train into a giant toy train, which would be crushed by the walls of a house. It's sorry, I'm going off topic here, but shrinking and expanding size is not something that is reasonable. We do need to mention this, and in fact this is something that I do cover somewhat in my next video, though on the opposite end, the next Beastiary video, in the opposite way, so do look forward to that. But again, in summary, generally changing human size is not a good idea, and is not something that we can generally justify. Serendipity's Train asks if it is at all possible for people to mirror videos on my channel. And I had to think about this for a few days before responding to Serendipity. And the conclusion that I drew is that, well, the videos that I create take a very long time to make. And although I don't earn a lot of money from them, only a few cents, hell, just literally a week ago, two weeks ago, I got the first $100 that I had earned from YouTube. So, yay. It's been 2 years, and that's all I've made. And plus the $2 from Savannah. To $3 from Savannah. I can't remember off the top of my head. So, it's a lot of work, and I'm not getting a lot. I'd rather not go into competition with myself on somebody else's channel. I hate to bring money into it, but, that kind of is what it is. If it happened that that my videos were taken down for whatever reason, you're absolutely welcome to mirror the videos somewhere else and give credit back to my channel. But unless the circumstances are very specific, I would prefer people didn't copy and re-upload the videos in their entirety. Obviously, general rules apply. If you want to critique or comment or just have fun with the videos, go ahead. Do what you want. I don't care. But if you're going to take the entire thing and re-upload it, I have to insist. Please, don't do that. But I do appreciate that you are that excited and that impressed by my work, Serendipity, that you are wanting to showcase it on your own channel. But again, I must stick to this principle. Well, it's not a principle, but this need. I do mention to Serendipity that if anybody is willing to or wants to host any of my videos on their channels, YouTube does provide a service where individual accounts can add any video to a playlist on their channel. You're showcasing the video, but you're not actually adding it to your own content. It still links back to my video, as it were. So if anybody wants to, please go ahead and do that. Moving on, Daniel Graves had a very interesting discussion with me about the biblical creatures, specifically the behemoth. I really enjoyed Daniel Graves' comment because, it was challenging. I had to stand by what I was saying and demonstrate my research. That was very exciting. They were saying that the behemoth is not in any way related to the Christian apocalypse, and this is true. But I was connecting a lot of the Abrahamic apocrypha to each other, and he also mentioned... but I'm not finishing the thought. I was connecting a lot of the Abrahamic apocrypha to each other, and basically the behemoth occurs only in the Jewish apocalypse, not the Christian apocalypse. But because both of these religions are derived from the same source, I thought I'd fudge it a little and sort of mix the two together. He also mentions that the behemoth was a plurality of creatures, so it wasn't just one as I presented in the video. But I did get to answer that we're never actually given a number as to how many behemoth there are. It's always spoken of in the singular, so it's a bit difficult to tell if there's one or many. I suppose there would be many, because if my hypothesis as to the elephant being the inspiration for the behemoth is correct, then there would naturally be many. However, to get the myth of the behemoth, a huge monstrous creature that eats an entire mountain of forests in a single day, we would necessarily have to have it be a single creature. Anything beyond that would be just, well, ecologically devastating. In fact, I don't even think that a single behemoth as described in the myth could survive. It's just, it just doesn't make sense. The amount of energy something like that would require is insane. It would spend its entire life eating. It would do nothing else. It would have to be very, very efficient at taking in energy as well. So I don't know. It's, these are myths. We can't really look at them at too much detail. But that's what I'm trying to do. So I suppose it's it's my fault. Daniel does go on to comment about the unicorn, and I rather enjoyed your comment here, Daniel. It shows that Daniel himself is doing a lot of research. Basically, he comments that he was matching the height of horses to not the height of horses. Sorry, the Karkatan and the Kirin are basically about the same height as a horse, but they all appear to be very similar. So in that way, he was expecting all of these creatures to be basically the same. Oh dear, I'm waffling. What a silly video this is turning out to be. Anyway, moving on. We've got I had a lot of comments by Thread Doctor. Thread Doctor seemed to be quite excited by all of these videos, and I'm really happy that you enjoyed these things. I'm not going to be able to address any of your particular comments because there's nothing that I have to say apart from agreeing with you in general. But I do appreciate the sheer volume that you offered in such a short time. And somebody wanted to bind a book with all of the creatures that I've made videos on. So, well, I mean, if you guys do create anything like that, do let me know, and I will let everybody who watches these videos take a look. It will be rather enjoyable. I had a correction on the dragon video by Matedo Vanderhide. Sorry if I'm butchering your name, saying that I should call flying dinosaurs pterosaurs, not pterodactyls, and that they aren't dinosaurs but very closely related. Yes, he is entirely correct. Pterosaurs are not actually technically dinosaurs. They're more closely related to birds, but generally dinosaurs are more closely related to birds than to reptiles, so it's a bit much of muchness. But I do enjoy your comments, so do keep bringing them forward. I really love when people add to the information of the videos. It's excellent. I encourage everybody to do that, especially if you have any critique of what I say. Remember, what I'm doing is trying to focus down and limit what I have to talk about, just to keep everything, in order for time. So your comments help to flesh everything out, especially if I'm wrong, because, then that's interesting. Then I learn something and we all benefit. I know that sounds very ideological and very hippie of me to say, but I really do think that that is quite true. EH mentions that they want to thank me for doing a follow-up video to the mermaids, and don't worry everyone, I will do follow-up videos where necessary, again, especially for the dragon. They had never heard of branding a kelpie, only using a bridle to tame one. That was something that I found to be quite interesting. Something that sort of connected that with me. How I found out about that was, I remember a while ago I was reading a Terry Pratchett novel where one of the characters puts silver horseshoes on a unicorn, and I thought, well, how do we tame creatures? How are mythical creatures often tamed? And actually, I collected a lot of information on that, which just so happened to contain information about the kelpie. Now, I didn't mention a bridle on the kelpie because that didn't seem particularly interesting to me, but the branding was quite fun, simply because, it's a water-based creature, and yet you tame it with fire. That was probably the best part of me, and I found it to be quite poetic. So, thank you for your comment, EH. I also got a very interesting compliment from Wowbagger86, saying British accent, check. Lofty dry language, check. I'm loving this. As I mentioned to them, I've never had a compliment like that, and I feel rather privileged that I can get such an interesting and creative and I suppose sincere compliment like that. So thank you so much. I do have a comment from JJ Kale that was asking for me to do a video on aliens. And this inspired me to take a look at it a little bit more, because I suppose technically, at least until we bump into the things, aliens are a myth. They do go into a little bit of strange detail. They say that they would not like me to do a video on insect-looking aliens, but more like Superman aliens type of stuff. And actually, it seems a bit of an arbitrary distinction. I get what you're saying, JJ, but I'm not entirely sure that we can really distinguish too much on these things. Mostly because we don't know what aliens would look like, and insectile aliens may well be a possibility. But again, he's asking about more humanoid type aliens. So that is the thing. Interestingly enough, Superman is based. Oh yeah, he compares it. He wants Superman-like aliens. Interestingly enough, Superman as an alien is rather well grounded in reality. If anybody has seen or read the comic books of John Carter from Mars, the Princess of Mars thingy, and there's also a film about it. The way John's superpowers are explained is just he has a far more dense muscular skeletal system, because when he goes to Mars, the gravity is significantly less, and as a consequence, he is far more powerful than any of the creatures that have evolved on Mars. And Superman originally started out this way. In fact, Superman was not able to fly. He was just able to jump in such a way that seemed like he was flying. And this was all because he was basically an alien. The idea originally is that being born from a planet whose conditions are more extreme than Earth's gives him what to us would appear to be superpowers on Earth. And this is not outside the realms of possibility. So it might be something that I take a look at. Mr. Oneupon also talks about the basilisk a little bit, saying that rather humorously, they wonder if the basilisk originally came from somebody switching a cobra's egg with a chicken's egg as a joke. I wouldn't be surprised if that actually happened. In fact, that would be absolutely hilarious. I would love to be at that event if we had a time machine, just watching people panicking and developing this story. Although time machines are terrifying. Megas Markelin gives me quite a nice compliment, saying that the channel is rather promising and that there's a good trailer, but asked if we forgot to put it on our homepage. I don't know what you mean by homepage. I'm sorry. I do have it sitting on the main channel for new people. It's the first thing that they'll see. But as for homepage, I can only imagine you mean Google homepage. In which case, I don't really use it all that often, but I'll try and do what needs to be done with that. So, yeah. Hayden Atkinson says that they don't want to poke holes in my depiction of the vampire, but the earliest depictions come from Lilith. I do remember that this was something that I forgot to say. Lilith is often credited as being more like a succubus or a vampire kind of creature, and I didn't mention it simply because it's one of the things that I had to cut. But thank you for noting that, and I do appreciate it. As always, please guys, keep the comments coming. Otherwise, at that point, we're done with the comments. Good grief, this has gone on for way too long. I'm sorry anybody who gets bored very quickly, but we've now had a very, very long time of just comment reading. My god. Centaur video. I rather enjoyed the Centaur video because this was very grounded in reality. I could focus on the biological nature of the human aspect of the Centaur and the horse aspect of the Centaur and how these things combine. The World of Tears series that I mentioned in the video as part of the reification is actually a very good read, and I highly recommend that if anybody is looking for a more interesting and sort of out of left field fantasy series to read, go ahead and give the World of Tears series a look. Especially simply because, it does a lot of biology with mythical creatures. Because essentially what happens in that series is that a whole bunch of really bored, superpowered aliens create a universe, and they sort of try to, they're still bound by the laws of physics, so they sort of have to create the world that they want, but have to balance it with what is possible. And in that series, the centaurs are basically mostly lung tissue, which was quite fun. In fact, they're rather horrific. I do take a lot of liberties with what we define as a centaur. As you can see towards the end of the video, I compare a chrysalid to a centaur, a chrysalid from the XCOM series of video games. And technically it is a centaur-like creature because it generally follows the shape. But if we want to be very specific, a centaur is half horse, half human. And, well, as we saw, that's kind of impossible. A very fun creature and mythologically quite important, but just really not something that we can reasonably expect to be true. So that is one of the drawbacks to the centaur. Which kind of leads me to what I didn't like about this. I made way too many mistakes in this video. I was a little bit rushed, and not my research as such, but what I said was a little bit hasty. For example, I described the centaur in Fallout 4 as being quadrupedal. Meanwhile, actually it has 6 legs, not 4. And you can see this in the video when looking at the images of a centaur from Fallout. There are 6 legs. Just one of those things. And in fact, there's a lot of small mistakes. Again, I talk about the Hercules video, the one with Dwayne Johnson. That one, the time at which the centaurs appear isn't actually halfway through the film. It's a little bit more than that, and I should have been a bit more clear with the time. But it was interesting to see that there were other interpretations of how a centaur could have come about, namely the silhouette that is demonstrated in that movie. My general depiction of that film actually, though, was a little bit poor. Also, I had to cut out a lot of the centaur myth because they're rather naughty creatures. We have this weird relationship with them where at once we respect them and they're symbols of wisdom and power, but they also have this dual nature thing going on where they're actually rather deviant and not the best people to hang out with. I often used a lot of images of Chiron, the centaur who trained Achilles and Hercules and all of those heroes, and that's reused a lot if you look at that video. But Chiron is very unique, and I had to choose which kind of culture I wanted to represent of the centaur myth. Because basically I could go with the noble culture as being the main one, or I could focus on the more debauched side of it. And although I mentioned the debauched side, I didn't really present it as much as I should have. The Percy Jackson books, as I mentioned before, do give a better characterization of these centaurs, like party animals, literally party animals, and they drink a lot, they generally get into all sorts of trouble, etc. And I wasn't really able to bring that across satisfactorily, to me at least, in this video. So I want all of you to remember that centaurs, although they're presented as noble and amazing creatures, they're not actually what we expect. I alluded to that a little bit earlier when discussing what happens to... What was that one? Dolores Umbridge, that was her name. The prissy woman from Harry Potter. There's a lot of fan theories as to what happened to her when she was dragged off into the forest, and suffice it to say, those theories are probably correct. Just to be clear, she was dragged off into the forest by the centaurs as a sort of vicarious punishment for being just a stuck-up priss. So, that is something to be aware of. I don't want anybody to have any misgivings or misunderstandings about the centaur. Just know that they're not exactly what we would expect them to be. A lot of the mythical creatures that I do find myself dealing with basically are representations of humanity's dual nature. our at once we're being pulled in one direction to a higher calling, if you will, but we still have these base urges to deal with. And we see that in The Werewolf and in, what was it called? Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and, generally these things where people become some kind of horrible monster. So, instead of transforming, by the way, obviously the Centaur is at once both of these things, but it's really difficult to try and see it in any other way, which is also another problem that I had with the video, is that it feels like I'm rehashing old stuff. And obviously I don't want to do that. In the same way that I want to avoid viri and parasites, etc. as an explanation for how some mythical creatures could come about, I also want to avoid this dual nature. But there are only so many ways to interpret some of these creatures, and that's something that I had to do with the Centaur. So hopefully in future I don't run into any of those things. In fact, the next video that I do does mention that a little bit, but that I'm going to do does mention that a little bit. The terrible grammar, but hopefully it's more balanced out by everything else that I mentioned to speak of. So yeah, that's the Centaur video. Really not much to say actually. Just that, well, Centaur was a very average video. So yes, I hope everyone enjoyed it. Moving on. Future stuff. Well, as I said, I've got to do hero videos. I've got to do some other stuff. I'm planning on doing a few streaming related things, and I've been putting something else into the works, a bit more narratively driven, as I keep alluding to in these Cod-Pasts. It's coming together slowly. It's coming together a lot more slowly than I would like, in fact. But the problem is that I'm having difficulty setting up a set that looks believable. So, and it's kind of expensive, so I'm getting to that. But the first $100 that I earned is going straight into putting that thing together, putting everything together. So, yay, reinvesting in the business, as it were, what we should all do. Really, there's not much else to update on future plans. But if there's anything that you would like to see, again, do let me know. I don't want to make this Cod-Past run on too long because, well, I had quite a lot of comments to catch up on. And if the channel grows at the rate at which it has been growing recently, I don't think I'll be able to address as many comments as I have today. So if that comes to pass, do forgive me. I might have to make some kind of barrier to entry to having comments answered, but I want to avoid doing that as much as possible because, just it's not fun. I want to interact with you guys. I want you guys to help me with this, especially because, well, okay, I don't want you to help me with this. I mean, I want you to be with me as I do this. Especially because a lot of the stuff that I don't get around to mentioning are often covered in the comments by everybody who is speaking to the channel and with the channel. So it is something that I really, really want to continue. And if I put any kind of barrier in front of the, just getting addressed, it discourages that kind of interaction, and that's what I want to avoid at all costs. But again, I will need to employ some kind of filter for comments. I don't know what kind of form that will take. I'll see what else I can find on YouTube as to suggestions or how other people go about doing this. But for now, I'm still planning on doing a stream for the Fantastic Beasts. I've got about half of the assets together. Perhaps sometime soon, sometime this month, I'll have a stream ready for everybody to watch. Maybe you won't be there during the stream. I really only expect about 10 or 12 people to be watching it at that time, but I will try to keep it as interesting and fun as possible. And obviously I will leave it on the channel as a separate video. Similar, I'll attach it to the Cod-Past stuff, and we can all have a good look at the Fantastic Beasts and where to find them creatures. And that will satisfy two needs of mine, which is a bit more community interaction. I say community, well, a bit more people interaction with you guys, and also wanting to do more content. So yeah, do look forward to that. I will do an announcement video before I do any streaming though, so yeah, you will have time to prepare for it. Otherwise, with that, again, sorry for the lack of content this previous month, but been bloody busy. Hopefully everything will get back on track ASAP, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.